Hello my spooky and beautiful friends. If this is your first time to my channel, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Emily and today we are going to be talking all about whether or not the Titanic was sunk on purpose. Yeah, you heard that right. Get ready for everything that you thought you knew about the Titanic to be completely sunk. See what I did there? You see? No? Okay, let's get into it. So everyone knows the Titanic, right? And no, I am not talking about the Leonardo DiCaprio movie that was so loved and acclaimed. We are not going to be talking about that side of the Titanic today. We are talking about the White Star cruise liner, the Titanic. The Titanic is a famous ship that everyone knows about, not because of the actual ship itself, but because of the untimely demise of the ship on April 14th of 1912. So we are reaching really far back there today. So everyone knows the story of the Titanic, right? It was sailing out in the ocean and hit an iceberg and suddenly sunk. There was not enough lifeboats or life vests, and unfortunately only 700 people out of the 2,207 survived. We all grew up knowing this story so well, but what you might not know is that there might be a little bit more to this story that's a bit more sinister. So the Titanic was owned by the White Star Lines, which was a luxury cruise ship line. Along with the White Star ship line, the Titanic was also owned by j.p.morgan Chase, who was the man who originally founded Chase Bank. He also owned two other ships on the White Star line, the Britannic and the Olympic. The Britannic was not anything like the Olympic or the Titanic, but the Olympic and the Titanic were both extremely similar, sharing many qualities. They almost looked identical except for a few differences. The differences between the Titanic and the Olympic were small, but the bow of the Titanic had 14 portholes and the Olympic had 16. The Olympic also had uneven windows that were thin, and the Titanic had evenly spaced windows that were a little bit thicker. Years before the Titanic tragedy, the Olympic had somewhat of a tragedy of its own. On the 20th of September in 1911, the Olympic collided with the HMS Hawke just off the coast of the Isle of Wight. After this crash, the Royal Navy actually decided that it was the Olympic's fault and not the Hawke's fault, even though many people saw the Hawke crash into the Olympic. But somehow the Royal Navy decided that it was the Olympic's fault instead. This caused so many problems for the White Star Line, which were the owners of the Olympic and the Titanic. They had to basically just claim this as a loss, and they couldn't really repair it because these repairs were so expensive. It's not exactly cheap to repair a boat. And since this was technically their fault, even though many people saw the Hawke actually hit the Olympic, they weren't going to get any insurance money to help cover these fees. Because the Olympic would have to be taken out of service while it was repaired, the Titanic voyage had to be pushed back from the 20th of March to the 10th of April. The Olympic was still usable, but it was not safe by any means, and it had a slight lean to the left when it sailed. So keep that in mind for the rest of the video here. So to most people, it might sound totally insane to assume that j.p.morgan and the White Star Line officials decided to switch the Olympic with the Titanic to save cost and to collect insurance money. But stay with me here, because after hearing this, you might be a believer of this theory as well. Many people assume that the White Star Line and j.p.morgan both decided to actually switch the Titanic with the Olympic. And why would this benefit them, do you ask? Well, let's get into that. According to this theory, the White Star Line owners and j.p.morgan decided to switch the almost identical Titanic with the Olympic, knowing that it would sink to collect insurance money in on it. But since the Titanic was a brand new boat, they would collect a lot of money. That's a lot of dough for a brand new boat that's supposed to be unsinkable. There were two other boats that were near the Titanic on the fateful night that it crashed. According to this theory, j.p.morgan and the White Star Line had a plan to have the SS Californian, which was a ship that was nearby the Titanic the night that it crashed, be nearby to rescue everyone as the Titanic, or the Olympic, was sinking. Now, the people who worked for the White Star Line actually said themselves that if this unsinkable boat were to crash, it would take a total of 2 days to actually sink. They didn't necessarily think that the boat was unsinkable, but they thought that if the boat crashed, everyone would have enough time to get out and then some. So according to the theory, the SS Californian, which was nearby the Titanic when it crashed, was supposed to be in cahoots with the Titanic itself, and they were basically supposed to let each other know when the ship was about to go down and when it was purposely going to be sunk. This way the SS Californian could swoop by and pick everyone up, and everyone will be happy and safe and go home. And like I said, the SS Californian was actually nearby when the crash happened. And when the crash happened, they sent out distress signals, of course, to all of these surrounding boats. Well, the operator of the SS Californian was conveniently asleep when they sent out these distress signals. So they couldn't even help even if they wanted to, because they were too busy taking a snooze. Now, another interesting fact about this night was that there was another boat that was nearby called the Samson. The Samson was in between the Titanic and the Californian when the Titanic sank. The Californian thought the Samson was the Titanic, and the Titanic, of course, thought that the Samson was the Californian. So when the snoozing operator of the SS Californian finally came to be awake, he saw the Samson and assumed that everything was a-okay on the Titanic, when in reality, everything was not okay at all. All hell was breaking loose. And to make matters even stranger, later when the Californian was checked out by officials, they only found sweaters and blankets on the cargo ship. That was it. Nothing else. Seems a little sketchy and convenient to me. Seems like if you were gonna go pick some people up who, I don't know, had just hit an iceberg and were freezing in the water in their lifeboats, that would be exactly what you would need. Sweaters and blankets. Only the coziest of things. There was actually a scientist on the Titanic who noted to many people that he noticed the boat leaning to the left and was concerned about it. Remember how I said the Olympic got into an accident earlier and perpetually leaned to the left? J.P.Morgan and many of his A-list friends were actually supposed to go on the boat as well and had tickets to dock the boat, but mysteriously and coincidentally decided not to go and canceled their tickets the night before the Titanic docked. Another strange thing to add to this incident was that many people all over the US and even the world had visions and dreams that this ship was going to go down, or at least a giant boat was going to go down very soon. Seems like everyone's intuition was telling them that something sketchy was going on here. And if you believe in coincidences, this next fact is for you. A book called The Wreck of the Titan, or also known as Futility, was published in 1898 by a man named Morgan Robertson. This book was published 14 years before the Titanic incident happened. The story was about an unsinkable ship called the Titan that somehow sinks. So yeah, whatever. It might be a little bit weird that the ship was the unsinkable Titan and the ship that we all know was the unsinkable Titanic. But the coincidences get so much stranger. The similarities between the Titan and the Titanic are uncanny. In the novel, the Titan is a British-owned vessel that is around 800 feet long. The Titanic was also 800 feet long. The novel also explains how the Titan, the unsinkable ship, sank at midnight right after hitting an iceberg. The fictional ship sank in April 400 miles from Newfoundland. But in real life, the Titanic sank 400 miles from Newfoundland in April at midnight after also hitting an iceberg. The novel also explains how the Titanic had 3,000 passengers on it and not enough life jackets or lifeboats. And in real life, we all know that there was 2,207 people on the Titanic, and unfortunately, there was not enough lifeboats or life jackets to save them. So is it a coincidence that this book that was written 14 years before the Titanic incident happened is almost identical to how it happened in history? That's up for your own speculation. So what do you think now that you know all of this information about the Titanic? Do you think that there was something going on behind the curtains with J.P. Morgan and the White Line crew? Do you still believe everything that we have grown up hearing about the Titanic, or do you think something different now? Because I honestly kind of believe the J.P. Morgan theory because it just makes so much sense. And I probably forgot to mention this, but the day that the Titanic took off, it had 16 portholes, which is the exact amount of portholes that the Olympic had. The Titanic had 14. So why would this boat suddenly have 16 portholes when originally it had 14? It's not like they could just throw it on and cut out 2 new portholes in that short span of time. And keep in mind, this was the 1910s. There was no security cameras, there was no cell phones, there was no video cameras. there was nothing that could really trace them back if they were to do something like this. People were able to get away with so much back in the day, it's ridiculous. So I definitely think that there could have been something sketch going on behind the scenes. I don't necessarily 100% believe it. I just think that the coincidences are a little bit too strange when it comes to this topic. And what do you think about the coincidences with Morgan Robinson's novel that came out 14 years prior to the Titanic's sinking? Because at first I was thinking maybe j.p.morgan and the White Line crew actually read this book and got inspired to basically create insurance fraud this way, but there's no way that they could be able to calculate all of the fine, minute details that the book was able to replicate with the actual Titanic accident. It's not like j.p.morgan could just send out the boat 400 miles from Newfoundland and have it crash exactly at midnight in April. There's no way. Or maybe there is a way. Who really knows? Probably not us ever, because it has been so long since this happened and people have basically just forgotten about it and think of it now as a Leonardo DiCaprio movie. So that's just the way life is, I guess. But with that being said, that is going to be wrapping up this Spooky Sunday video. I hope you were able to find it entertaining, and let me know how you feel down in the comments below, because I know a lot of people believe j.p.morgan and the White Line crew were up to something. But I do hope that you consider subscribing if you have not already. I do Spooky Sunday every single Sunday here on my channel, and I have all sorts of makeup goodness happening here during the rest of the week. So if you are into spooky stuff and makeup, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. I do also hope that you consider giving this video a big ol' thumbs up and hitting that notification bell down below if you do want to know when I upload. And if you don't, then don't do any of that. And just keep passing on by, and thank you for coming to my video. But I hope you are having an absolutely amazing and slightly spooky day wherever you are. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye!